But yeah, we will move on then to previewing this weekend's game between the Pumas and the All Blacks. Again, Argentina technically home, but this is a technicality because it's all taking place in Australia.
They apparently have annexed a little bit of Australia north of Sydney called Newcastle. That is Argentinian home territory now.
Base camp for the last few weeks. And yes, so the game's going to be taking place this Saturday, 28th of November, 8:45 a.m. That's our time over here, and it's 7:45 local time at as you say, McDonald Jones Stadium, which is in Newcastle City, and it's going to be refereed by Nick Berry.
Nick Berry,
he's been on the touchline for a few of the other games.
He's one of them out there. I wouldn't say he's the best, but hopefully he won't be too negative a presence on the pitch. Hopefully we won't be talking about the ref come Monday, and then come next week. That's always the hope.
Yes.
The weather conditions are set to be perfect again
as you'd
Newcastle. 21 degrees and sunshine with some nice breezes, but perfect conditions for running rugby.
Both of these ambitious sides should be hoping to put it through the hands and score some tries this week. We could have a few more tries than last week.
One would hope. We could scarcely have fewer.
This is true. But just as far as the colour of the game, obviously the Tri-Nations has become quite an intriguing tournament overnight with the last, well, not quite overnight, but the last 2 weeks
has been since obviously Argentina coming in has been magnificent, but this is a great little tournament, and as much as it sucks not having the Springboks in there, and I do understand their reasoning, I think what has emerged is a great dynamic, and we don't yet know the future of the Springboks, but gee whiz, if we get a rugby championship with all four of these sides competitive with one another, it would be some viewing.
It would.
And it already is some viewing in the sense of this competition being very, very interesting, and all teams on 6 points at the moment.
That's right.
I think the All Blacks on top, but the Pumas with 2 games to play.
That's right. The game in hand is sitting in Argentina's pocket, so it's definitely it's an interesting one from as far as navigating a tournament's concerned. Both like the Argentinians have the technical advantage in that.
Argentina, like we'll get into the squads in a moment, but there's suspicion that they're going to make a rake load of changes. Like, they're obviously going to have to front up the All Blacks as a tough test. If they can get a 4-1 defeat here in terms of bonus points, if they can limit New Zealand to less than, I think it's the 3-try rule, less than 3 tries ahead of them, or maybe it's 4 tries, I don't know. But if they can stop them from getting a try bonus and keep within 7 of them and get that losing bonus point, a win would be enough for them next week. So it's in their hands. But from the All Black point of view, you know, if they can get a bonus point win here in 5-0 Argentina, there's going to be nothing they can do about it next week, or Australia, short of absolutely racking up a crazy score either or against each other, which is unlikely. So it's in both sides' hands here in terms of the trophy. And kind of backs to the wall for the All Blacks. It's the last game of the season. They're reeling from back-to-back losses, which is absolutely an unusual spot for them to be. And Kane and Fozzie Bear have been at the media's throats, and the media's been at their throats. And they've been at sort of the fans' throats as well. It was a harsh one. I actually watched the interview with Sam Kane that led to all the chagrin. Like, he was saying what he said, but I understand where he's coming from, and you know, in the context of everything we see, sometimes it's hard to divorce, you know, critique and etc. And they are like a demanding nation with the All Blacks means more, and they always say it's about the team and not the individual. But you know, when you've got a bunch of guys working their holes off, and I think Sam Kane in particular has done nothing but good rugby, and then to see him getting, like, presumably getting vile criticism from fans, it's important just to rein that in and remember that, you know, these guys are doing their best.
They're doing their best.
Hard-working professionals.
It's true. And they came up against a mighty Pumas performance, and they were a changed side. Like, there's excuses to be made, as well as absolute lynchings that could happen, but there's no doubt that the pressure is on and the spotlight's on the camp, and with it being the last game, it's now the biggest game.
They've been stewing with this. Like, they didn't get a chance to respond last week. They had to have a bye, so they've had 2 weeks of this teeth grinding going on. And usually, if you wanted to look at a historical point of view, usually what happens when a Kiwi team has their backs to the walls to that extent, the next game is brutal, and it doesn't tend to matter who they come up against. The next game is brutal. Like, we saw it when they were responding, and like in years gone by, even Richie McCaw teams, whenever they lost the World Cup #1 ranking, or whenever they played France after losing the World Cup quarter final, the next game was always something fierce.
Yes, indeed. They want to get wins back.
Ireland suffered it after they first beat them in Chicago. 2 weeks later, bludgeoned to death
in the home
Dublin.
stadium. We know all too well what an All Black backlash can feel like, and the Pumas have never faced it, because one of the things that goes along with your first ever win against the All Blacks is your first ever backlash from the All
your
Blacks.
first ever game against them where they know you've beaten them, and they know you can beat them, and it tends to be a brutal thing, but they haven't been great this year.
No, they haven't. So the pressure is on, and it'll be interesting to see how they respond. But then just moving on to the squads for both teams, as you kind of highlighted earlier on, it's suspected. We got a leak earlier on that
got a leak from our sources from Twitter. I mean, there's a lad Paul Tate who's worth following. I think he's America's Oval on Twitter, but he has good updates on the Argentinian team, and he's essentially just talking about the squad, what they're lined up in training, which has for every game this tour has mirrored the exact same team that they ended up going with. So we actually have a decent idea, although you'll probably have the squads now when we're talking about this tomorrow, but we don't as it is, because we're here on Wednesday evening, so we don't have the squads yet. But we suspect that they're making 10 changes, that they're dropping the 2 props to the bench and bringing in Vivas and Medrano in a prop. They're dropping Alamano to the bench in favour of Paulos. They're dropping Bruni for Facundo Isa, which feels like a form decision. Facundo Isa,
2 new centres, De La Fuente and Malia in the midfield. We know De La Fuente, but Malia is a new face, young guy,
and a back 3 of Ramiro Moijano, Santiago Cordero, and Emiliano Belfelli with Ezcura at 9, all of whom have good test experience. It's actually like if you were to tell me just on the face of it, Argentina could make 10 changes here, I'd say they can't cope. But then you look at the team they've picked. Rake loads of test experience. All the important guys are still there. Your Guido Pettis, your Montoyas, your Sanchez,
your Matera,
obviously, that whole back row, and then even you've got Teta Chaparro and Cadea to come on and bolster that scrum. So it's actually
bit of Bertranu and Carreras off the bench in the back line as well. It's got good impact as well. Like they're in rude health, and we were noting that in the first game, obviously against the All Blacks again. That just looking at some of the guys who weren't togged out, despite the guys on the pitch, and you're going like, geez, there's Facundo Isa now, and he's not involved, and there's Buffelli, he's not involved, and here they are beating the All Blacks. Yeah, they have rude health as far as depth, and this is, as we've highlighted, like a World Cup camp where they're rooted, they're not travelling. So it seems like part of the plan to try and manage their cardio, because 4 weeks in a row against All Blacks Wallabies is a very, very tough thing to do.
We know from watching Argentina 15s, obviously in a lesser competition, but that Argentina 15 time that runs through those Tier 2 competitions in South America, that there is serious depth in Argentina, and any squad of 30 that they assemble, if they're all fit and well, are going to be able to do a job. So absolutely making the changes here makes all the world of sense. For the All Blacks, we don't actually have that squad yet, but there's a number of selection options available to them. I suspect we'll see the return of some heavy hitters, Aaron Smiths and the like, who didn't feature the last day.
That was
or did he? Sorry, no, I think did they haul him off? Which game was that?
No, they hauled him off. It was the last game. Yeah, the one previous was the one with Pierre
against Australia.
Yeah. No, they had him on, and he was their best player, and he was keeping him in, and then they took him off.
That's what happened.
Yeah. Just to remind you there of that one. So squad management, All Blacks ? We don't obviously have the squad, but there's still a whole load of decisions they can make. We're going like, can Rico come back in and play 13? Is that experiment abandoned? Their centres, we do know the ones that they picked last time were very much a weak link in terms of their offense. Their multi-phase did not click. They were crowding Moanga a lot of the time. They were running poor lines, as contrasted with the Argentinian centres, who were running nice aggressive lines at the space and finding holes. So the centre is one question mark. They do have multiple options in the back row and in the pack in general, but where they're a little tight is at tight head. That was where they were.
It's Tiro Lomax and Nepo Laulala, so whichever way they go, they're going to be struggling to hold the scrum down. So I expect Tui Pilato and Whitelock will be in there for heft. It's a question of whether or not they bring back Satutu. Obviously, it doesn't really. It in terms of the personnel, there's still a lot of quality in there. It's not the most massive deal who they go for. They can all deliver. But I certainly would like to see someone like Damien McKenzie come back in. I think Jordy Barrett hasn't worked at all this tour. He's been way too bludgeoning and not enough subtlety to him. I think he's a guy you could probably get out of there.
Well, when you have the likes of Will Jordan hasn't had any
Will
minutes
Jordan's
yet.
The other one. He's been on tour the whole time, and he hasn't got his chance yet.
No.
Right through Bledisloe and right through these 2 games, and he to say he was in good form would be to understate it some. He was
he
arguably the form player in New Zealand, which was
himself and Caleb Clark were lighting it up in terms of backfield play, and it'd be nice
how
to
well
see
Caleb Clark worked when he got his chance. Will Jordan's another one who's been tearing it up at Super Rugby Aotearoa level, so I would be disappointed not to see him feature, but not necessarily surprised with the way things have gone under Foster.
No, it's true.
But either way, I think it's going to be about, obviously from an All Black point of view, it's going to be about rectifying the things that were problematic. But before we get into them, we are going to just look at the game from the point of view of both teams and start with the allegedly home side, Argentina.
That's right, yeah. So we'll look at the winning conditions for both and just what they want to do with and without the ball. And we'll start with when they have the ball, optimistically, how they want to attack. And just broadly, as we were kind of highlighting in the review section earlier on, they need to be a bit more clinical overall with ball in hand.
Clinical is one word, like creative is probably another.
Creative is probably another. Like they haven't yet had the experience of being kind of chasing a game, even though they were behind in that in the game last weekend. Didn't feel like they were chasing too much. They were able to. They had the time to kick the 3-pointers.
They made the game about other things. They haven't really launched many attacking sets.
Their defense has dominated most of the games, and actually, in terms of how they attacked, the way they did in the first game with the verve and the tempo and the moving of the pill, Kubeli set a lovely tempo, and they varied the point of contact so much that even though they weren't quite penetrative, like the one try they got, they managed to get over the top and get a lucky break, but they didn't quite penetrate. But they did probe and they did move the All Blacks around. And then the All Black penalty count crept up, and that was what allowed them to exert that scoreboard pressure. So that is obviously the kind of blueprint of how to go about this attacking this All Blacks, but you can't expect them to show the same lack of discipline or surprise at your physicality. You're not going to catch them unawares this time.
Yeah, they're going to be much better this week, and I think they have to assume that. It was funny in the game against Argentina A, the second game, they managed to rack up actually 52 points against a team with lots of Super Rugby players, etc. We know now, like we suspected before the first game, that's a pretty positive result. Things could happen, but this was obviously a very good team, and that team were probably a class below.
Yeah,
but it shows that they've got tries in them, and we know, watching Argentinian rugby over the last number of years, and even watching it at a domestic level, etc., whenever you see Argentina teams play, they tend to be very full of flair, full of attacking instinct, not unlike sort of a French side. Their instincts in the wide channels tend to be good. They just haven't really played the ball there. I think in terms of offering something new to the game, obviously Sanchez's boot is massive and it's great, and
but you actually have Buffelli back in there now. Buffelli's going to think that could help with both distribution and kicking. I think he has more experience than Carreras, and it could get them a little wider,
no question, and it'll help them from a defensive point of view as well. Buffelli's great when he's at his best, but just in terms of moving the ball, I would love to see them really try and probe the outside channels of New Zealand. New Zealand did do a great job in the games against the Wallabies of being very physical and holding their width. So it is tough, when you got a line of big All Black defenders who are highly motivated to smash you. But just probing on those insides and then trying to isolate when the space is there, whenever that line is fractured, whenever they do narrow up, really trying to attack that space and isolating those opportunities, and then failing that, obviously owning the contacts, getting Matera into the faces of them again, showing them that you're not going to wilt even if they do front up, that this is going to be a serious physical contest, and then moving the ball around within that and all the ways that you
tempo is key. That's what the main difference between week 1 and week 2 with the Pumas is that they didn't get to set their tempo in the second game, but they very much did in the first, which was against this opposition. And as I said, part of that was seemingly catching the All Blacks unawares of just how physical they were. The physicality shocked them, and then the silly penalties came. So I think that's going to be redressed in this test by the All Blacks, so the Argentinians will have to factor that in, that they probably won't be able to milk as many of these penalties. They will have to create a bit more. They'll probably just have to score a bit more with tries. This is probably going to be the equation, and they'll have to be game for doing that. They didn't, like in the first test, they didn't really get their wingers on the ball. The wingers came in field to look for the ball on occasion, and they did, that's always a good sign of an industrious winger trying to get his hands on the ball, but the Argentinian back three men work best when they're in the wide open space, and they didn't really get to do that at all.
Even if it's to be the three this week, I mean, you talk about Santiago Cordero, coming back into the team. What a superstar he is at the best of times. And even Ramiro Moijano, I believe he's the guy who has that ghosting try against the All Blacks.
That's right,
I think that was one that was scored in Eden Park, where he ghosts inside one and then outpaces another on the wide channel. It's just this lovely flowy S tracking run that he runs through the All Black defence. He's a great offensive player with great offensive instincts and a nice turn of pace when he needs it. They've got very, very exciting players, and certainly getting those guys in space would be huge. And they could do it if they mix up the kicking game and edge their contests. The All Blacks are going to have their hands full defensively.
It's very true. But then what about when they're defending, however? The Argentinians trying to stop this All Black team. They did a good job the last time. Like, obviously their defence has been what's built their success in the tournament so far. To be honest, it's been mostly that. Even
their
though
defence and limiting the All Blacks of opportunities, and that's where the kicking game, like almost obviously this is when they don't have the ball, but even when they have the ball, the handling error, the lack of handling errors, and the accuracy of the kicking game in terms of not allowing the All Blacks many or any ideal counter-attacking situations is huge. And then you get into this position where you're defending the multi-phase. When the All Blacks have been in trouble this year under Foster, and to be honest, like we talked about that backlash from the 2016 game, we talk about the All Blacks against the Lions, we talk about them going into this World Cup. When their backs have been to the walls in recent times, they have gone to a power game. And they've gone to try and bludgeon you. So they're going to try, and whoever they pick, whether it's like the Frizzels, the Tuipolotus, the Whitelocks, the Cody Taylors, Ardy Sevilla, brutal in the contact, they're going to try and bludgeon the Pumas. They're going to assume and hope that they're a little softer than they were and play much more accurately themselves. But I don't think off first and second phase, they'll try and be sharper off the chaos balls, which Argentina have to limit. But off those phases, I think a crucial element, if they can get out of the line, as they have been doing, and front up in those tackle areas, that's going to be massive. It's a huge step up, not a step up, but it's a huge ask for the likes of Kramer and Matera and Petty, who've put their bodies on the line now for Sanchez 2 weeks in a row, spent 2 games in a row, both games the majority of the time they were defending. And they defended brilliantly physically. And now the All Blacks off a bye week with their backs to the walls, with these brutal ball carriers. I reckon they're going to try and break through them. I reckon they're going to say this is the week. And from an Argentine point of view, you know, the task is very simple, but it's also extremely physically demanding.
It's the same question we were asking last week. Can they keep up that intensity, that pitch that they were at, and the ferocity that they brought? Because that's really the difference between the positive and the negative in the contact zone. Like, all of these guys are big and huge, and these packs are probably similar weight in terms of weight. It's just going to be a matter of will and technique by the end. And as you say, week on week, guys like Matera and Kramer and Petty in very attritional roles, Montoya as well. Like, is there going to be a drop off? We hope not, but defence will reveal it.
I don't think if they spend as much of this game defending as they have the last 2, that they're going to have a hope of winning.
No,
I don't think so. I just think it's very, very difficult week on week to produce that, and the standard is going to go even up from here. And they were creaking at times against Australia, and the dam could open this week, so they have to be very careful about that. They do have to be I think smarter in terms of how they move the ball and moving it better and working the territory game and forcing the All Blacks to exit rather than allowing them into your territory and soaking up a load of tackles, which has been their identity so far, but they're just going to have to be careful.
It's a tough ask to do that for a whole tournament, to be honest. And like, it's been impressive it's a good big compliment to their defence that in both of these games they've yet to go behind by more than 3 points in the first half. They've actually been in the game duking it out pretty tightly despite defending for large periods of those things. But I suspect this could be the week where they may have to chase it a little. So obviously pivoting just back to their attack will have to be sharper, as we said. But their defence, that's going to be the one that reveals whether they're there to win or there to roll over.
Simple things like what they did to Caleb Clark on week 1. Like, Caleb Clark was given sort of the Joe Nalomu against South Africa treatment in the World Cup final, where every time he got the ball there were 3 or 4 Pumas on him. They'd obviously been watching all that match footage and were alarmed by him. So they came out to get him, and they did a good job of it. But he's coming again this week, and he's going to be tough to deal with there as well. And as we say, in terms of the backfield coverage, Buffelli in there is a strength.
I think that strengthens them, but both as far as exiting through kicks, it gives Sanchez another option out wider to kind of pivot to. It's big boot Buffelli, as we've often branded him. He has a huge pumping boot, which in a pinch can just get you far away away from your
punish
try line.
loose kicking if it comes.
Exactly, like you can't afford to be loose to this All Black side. We know that it's going to be Bowden Barrett back there. He's going to run it back with interest and try and link up, and they're all very sharp on it. So yeah, limiting those kinds of balls, try and kick on your own terms and exit on your own terms as Argentina. But yeah, they'll have to try and man up on defence and edge that kicking territory battle, and then they'll be in the game. You know, I really do think that this Pumas squad, with this temperament that they've shown, they could be a match for this All Black
even
side.
with these guys like Facundo Issa coming into the team is going to bring that heft. And absolutely, they're certainly talented enough, and they seem to be well drilled enough and know what they're doing enough, and the All Blacks are desperate enough that if it stays tight in those early exchanges, there's only one side going to be under pressure, and there's only going to be one side buoyed by it. And that's the Pumas
for sure. Yeah, and if you can try and broadly paint them, just force them narrow. The All Blacks kind of, as you say, want to go to that power game a lot of the time in the last couple of seasons. If you can force them narrow and win that collision zone, then the pressure is huge on the All Blacks, and then who knows, maybe you'll see the counter-attacking Argentinians breaking off the pressure rather than the other way around. That would be a massive moment, but they're going to try and create it. Then just pivoting onto the set piece from both sides' point of view, because this is going to be huge. It was huge in the first game, and it was Argentina who made it theirs, really. Particularly the scrum, the contest at the scrum. We know that Argentina traditionally scrummage aggressively. We know that Ledesma, as a head coach, was one of those traditional aggressive scrummagers.
The very first thing that Ledesma brought was set piece solidity, and in fact it was the World Cup. We were probably a bit harsh on him in hindsight, looking back in the World Cup, but obviously time will only tell. But what he managed to fix was the set piece. They had great line out drive. They had a great scrum. Unfortunately, they lost just about everything else.
It's true. And a bit of identity crisis themselves. Then when they're caught between, are we the running winger guys, or are we the running winger wide guys but soft in the tight, or are we really controlled in the tight but then the wingers don't see the ball?
And I think Ledesma's right to build from that firm base, and then you can add layers on top of that, and that's kind of what we want to see this week. But in terms of how the battle goes, the All Blacks obviously weakened with Lomax and
it's with Tuamafasi since he's been gone. That is a huge loss for them. We didn't even know. We were complimentary of him in the first few weeks of Bledisloe because he was brilliant and he was up against a dynamic Tupou and all this, but we didn't quite know how important he is to the All Blacks until he goes. I mean, it's kind of like I don't even know if they knew.
He was revolutionary for them. They had been getting weaker in that position, and Olfa Tuamafasi has been exceptional. And so him coming in there was crucial in terms of them implementing that power game. And so locking down the scrum is going to be the number one goal. It's why I suspect they'll go with your Tui Pilatus and your Whitelocks and look to lock it down
in the engine room.
It looks like the Pumas are changing it up and unleashing Tata Chaparro off the bench. I suspect the All Blacks will be game for it in the first half. But that dynamic, if the All Blacks opt for they might opt for Laulala to start just to avoid the dynamic of bringing Laulala on at the same time that Tata Chaparro comes on.
Because that's a mismatch.
That is a mismatch. That's danger, because Laulala's really lost it in the scrum at test level. Like he's either getting absolutely heaved up going backwards, or every time we've seen him in recent times he just goes straight to deck because he's paranoid about the power of his opposite number and hence just tries to bring the scrum down.
Not a good sign in a tight head. No. Especially if you're going to try and play a test level or a kind of a power game, as you say. It starts with the scrum. It's very difficult to be a bludgeoning power team without a dominant scrum. But I think that's what they're going to try and bring this game. I think they're going to try and lock the scrum down, as you say. Maximum goal is just stop the Argentinians, as we say, they kind of drive as an 8 through the 2, and dynamically there's a lot of shifting and pulsing in the front row as they're trying to get an edge with grappling and in the collision zone just after the hit. Post-hit shenanigans go on a lot with the Argentinian scrum, so it's a big job to contain it, and I think once the All Blacks do manage to contain it, they'll fancy that's one of the primary goals accomplished, and they can start to implement the rest of their game. But conversely, if the Argentinians can start getting penalties off, then suddenly the All Blacks are paranoid about dropping balls, and then that feeds into the question of do you offload or not. It all forces them a little more narrow, a little more conservative if you're afraid of the scrum.
Yeah, 100%. As far as the line out goes, I think things will be a little bit more straightforward. The All Blacks did a good job the last time of not allowing the Pumas to get the ball going at all. And I think they'll be looking basically for that again. And likewise, the Pumas don't have too many competitive line-out figures. It's not an area they go to for their turnover game. So I think line-out's likely to be more straightforward, especially I would suspect Cody Taylor's coming back in. I'd be shocked if they went for Dane Coles again after his showing the last day.
Yes, me too. Especially, again, goes to that scrum. He's a more physical guy up there, as well as with better darts at the moment.
So I think with Cody Taylor in there, with Whitelock in there, you're looking at a solid All Black line-out, and the Pumas line-out has had no issues so far. The All Blacks aren't going to look to compete majorly because they're going to be looking at stopping the maul.
Maul defence will be key. Yeah, I think actually for both, because the All Blacks have been looking to get their offensive maul rumbling. They've done so to the Wallabies. They did so a bit to the Pumas in the first test, even as they were trying to work their way back in. That's where they got their try.
That's the only try the Pumas have conceded so far this year it was a quick maul, no jump straight. I think I can't remember who the ball was to. It might have been Sam Kane off the top.
It was somebody. It was that too. Anyway, it was a catch you napping kind of play, and they did, and it worked. So the maul defence for the Argentinians definitely has to be sharp. They cannot afford to go behind with a cheap score like that. Like obviously that was a bit. The game was a dead rubber. They were kind of still in glee mode because they couldn't believe they were that far ahead of the All Blacks, and even that try didn't do enough to change that. But if that exact same try is scored in the first quarter to put the All Blacks ahead, that is suddenly major alarm bells for the Pumas side. A Pumas side that has struggled at times to get their offense purring and get it clicking and create the scores themselves. They definitely don't want to be conceding cheap ones on set piece. And then the last set piece is just the restarts, and I think for both teams the MO is the one that we've been looking at most recently, the kind of the global trend of restarts. Try and kick to the corner, try and get it as deep as you can, force the box kicking exit from your own 22, and then set up either an offensive line out in the half or an opportunity to kick return, which the All Blacks will love if they kick it in field, or a big boot Buffelli to down Barrett's throat and a chance for him to run back. That's obviously a big part of the All Blacks plan.
Yeah, there's no real value to kicking to recover for either team. I mean, the All Blacks, they want to make the Pumas uncomfortable. They don't want to have them play their defence into it. They want to make them exit. Yeah. And likewise, the Pumas just want to get some territory because they haven't had any all tournament pretty much.
Yeah.
So both sides are going to be launching it deep off restarts.
I would imagine
the accuracy of the kicks and the kick chase is going to be big factor in how well that works out.
How much hang time can you get on them? There are some who are graded at Owen Farrell in the World Cup was kind of showing the way for how to do that exact restart very, very well. And then we'll move on just to the All Blacks and what they want to do with the ball. What are their winning conditions for this game? When they're attacking, obviously they're still struggling to kind of create things in the multi-phase. That's been the prevailing bugbear with this new All Black side, and as you say, it's not necessarily just the new All Black side, it's kind of been lingering a little bit for the last couple of years.
There's like personnel wise, obviously they're struggling in terms of, like, you look back on the great All Black side, which this side has slowly drifted from, really, and it's been a slow process. It started sort of in and around the Lions tour time, and then has drifted from there in terms of that great 2015 team. Personnel wise, when you had a team that used to have, Ben Smith and
Conrad Smith,
Man Onu, Sonny Bill Williams, like the difference makers that they have in the midfield, Dan Carter as well as a distributor. But mind you, I don't think the issues are at 10. I think both 10s, Bowden and Richie, are great. But what's missing really is that punching element in the centre. The way around that is the dual distributor thing, and whether you get Mackenzie in, I'd love to see it. I suspect they won't. I suspect it'll be Richie and Bowden. But those guys need to be linking up with one another, and they just need to attack. It's not enough anymore with the guys they have at the moment to just say, we trust their instincts, and they're going to be grand. And that's fine if you win your contacts and you create overlaps on the inside, and then they'll finish them, and like maybe that's the plan, and maybe it'll work. But in terms of long term developing something, they just need to bring in a little more shape. A couple of screenplays where Bowden is playing off Richie.
That's what's missing. That's the main thing that's missing.
But Bowden's such an ideal second distributor because the guy is a 10. Richie's a threat on the line. The guy next to him is going to be a threat. If you can pull it back to Bowden, He's obviously a threat to pass the ball, but if he's coming onto it at pace, he's going to occupy defenders. Either he can hit a short guy or a long guy. There's going to be space somewhere, and if the defence drifts off, he'll score.
He scored tries like that from 10 and 15.
Just the creativity and a bit of shape is what we love to see. But I suspect they'll try and bring that power game. They'll try and rumble through the Pumas for the reasons that we were talking about when we were talking about Argentina. They're going to be the Pumas are going to be a little tired, perhaps a little flat-footed.
Yeah.
The All Blacks are going to be hungry, and they're just going to look to get more of an edge on those contacts. The sort of Artie Savia stuff that you see.
He was quiet, kept quiet in game one. You might expect to see him rumble out in game two with a point to prove.
In that first game, the Pumas were edging those contacts. They were edging the second shove. They were getting themselves in the right positions and not allowing the All Blacks to burst through. I suspect the All Blacks will be focusing on just being more accurate in that area, putting the right footwork on it, hitting them in the right place, getting that after contact shove going, and getting over the gain line.
For that, Aaron Smith is pivotal to them for that, because even with all the things they got wrong in the first game, Aaron Smith was keeping them in the game with exactly that, was putting some of his forward carriers onto the ball nicely into bits of space around the ruck. They're playing off 9 a lot these days, as you say. It's kind of a power game, and what affords them that luxury is kind of the accuracy, crispness and tempo that Aaron Smith brings. And you saw when it was TJ in the Wallabies game, it was a little less accurate, it was a little less crisp, and the whole system kind of dissolved around
and when
that.
they took him off for Brad Weber the last day, like that, the moment that happened, it was like they're done.
There was no fight left in the game. No, he is super important to just driving that All Black tempo that they want to create. But then beyond that, as you say, we'd like to see a bit more expansive rugby from Mo'unga Barrett. It's a Mo'unga Barrett axis that we keep calling it, but apart from a few little kick and chase plays or a few kick return plays, we haven't really seen them combine in the multi-phase. Especially, that's where it's been missing. And you think when attacks stall, like the idea, like when you see Australia do it a lot with a lot of speed, you can have those two guys. You can have Richie and Barrett peel to the short side or the open side quickly from behind
Australia
the ruck.
do it so well, but if this is stuff they work on in training, so they're in sync with one another. And for the All Blacks, you get the sense a lot of the time that it's just let the boys play, they'll execute, and they'll use their heads up footy, and it's not enough at the moment with a Pumas defence that's killing them. One of the things that is true about the Pumas defence is that at times against Australia, they literally had one man tackle and then get up, and then he would contest in the ruck, and everyone else would be fanned across the line. And there was a couple of times when they were in their own 22 where they had a 15-man line, literally no one in the backfield, and a 15-man line. So from an All Black point of view, I reckon one of the adjustments they will make for sure is to try and work better kicks in. They nearly got it off a couple of times against the Pumas. It was their most almost threatening moment. But when you've got guys like, Mo'unga can obviously kick it really well, Aaron Smith can kick it really well, Bowden can kick it really well, even Jack Goodhue has a decent boot on him. Like moving the point of contact and moving the ball around, and then varying a kicking game to punish the Argentines for being so aggressive, and leaving space potentially in the backfield. Those can be long kicks, those can be probing, attacking kicks, but they do need to work some patterns.
And they just need to be varied as well.
And just punish the Pumas, put them down
too
in their
often
half.
the last game. It was all they were trying to do that, but it was too often a box kick. And even though Aaron Smith's executing a box kick very well, all you get out of a box kick is a 50-50 chance to catch the ball up there, and sometimes it's not even that much in favour because there are blockers. It's tough to get up there. So varying the point of contact and varying the kicking game. Try and find grass with them. Try and move them around. Vary the trajectory and probe a little. And then conversely, to the point about like Argentina will want to contain Caleb Clark again. The All Blacks will want to try and unleash him this time because he was really kept under wraps in the first test.
They just weren't getting the ball wide enough, and then he was coming off his wing, and all of a sudden it was the Guido Pettis and Pablo Materas of the world that were hitting him, and double teaming him. So he needs to be on the wing, and they need to be looking without him to soften up that Pumas defence and then get him on the ball in space. That's the key. You want him 1-on-1 with Montoya or Cordero. That's what you want.
Ideally, that's the scenario, because he'll win that battle. He just wasn't really given the chance in the first test, and that's credit to the Pumas, but it's definitely from the All Blacks attacking point of view something they'll definitely want to remedy this time. You want to see Caleb Clark making some inroads, getting his hands on the ball in space, and causing the Pumas some problems.
Absolutely.
Then just when they're defending, we'll pivot on. The All Blacks trying to stop the Pumas. They did struggle here in the first test. Obviously they were a bit shocked by the speed, a bit shocked by the width and variation. Like, it didn't get much further than the centres, but both centres in the first test were cutting nice lines that were checking the line, and they were just off both 9 and 10 kind of doing little pop passes and moving it around, really a lot of subtlety and deception as well as speed. And from there the penalties came. So, like, first point of focus this week, All Blacks, fix your discipline. Like, the penalty count was shocking and
Yeah.
criminal, and
Some of them
were born of pressure. And to be fair, penalties are part of the game. If the Pumas do ask good questions and are banging at the line, and sometimes a penalty will be conceded just because of that speed, that you can forgive. But like the Dane Cole's slap in the face penalty reversal stuff that just comes of being tilted, that has to stop. Check that stuff at the door, because it'll kill you. Like, and it's no way to be. And like the likes of like the Locks were anonymous last time out, apart from giving away 1 or 2 penalties at line out time. And the same was true for a lot of members of the pack. They were all kind of guilty collectively and individually. So this will be a huge work on and a huge point of emphasis.
Yeah, if they can do something like they back their heft and they back their physicality, and if they can do something similar to what the Pumas guys were doing, because last week the Pumas offense looked rusty as hell.
It did.
They're going to have, I think, the third scrum half in as
brand
many
new
matches.
centres.
If they can get up out of the line and win physical contacts and impose themselves, that Facundo Isas of the world, if he can come in and start making a rake load of tackles himself, they could almost out Pumas the Pumas and put them under pressure and get them going backwards and force them to loosely kick to them. And this is the thing about the counter-attacking game, which is really where they want to score their tries. We talked about their offense without it, but last week the Pumas were kicking, or the last game the Pumas were kicking a little bit too much on their own terms, and every time Bowden Barrett got the ball, even if he had space in front of them, he had this line of Pumas coming after him, and there really wasn't much room to work with. But forcing awkward kicks, putting the kicker of the ball under enormous pressure with line speed, and then attacking the pill at contact, trying to create those dynamics where you feel you have an edge on the transition, like actively seeking those out from a defensive point of view is going to be massive. It means better jackal threat from the likes of Sam Cane, etc. But it also means guys in the contact winning your contacts and then attacking the ball, sort of NFL style, batting it away, and pouncing on the loose ball is going to be massive here from an All Black point of view. They need. I think Argentina had like 1 spilled ball last week, and all the kicks to the All Blacks never really get them in. They need to generate some counter-attacking chances if they are going to get a score up. Exactly.
They thought in game 1 they were like, that was another part of their plan, but they think that creating the chaos through a box kick or something was gonna yield some of that. It didn't. So the adjustment has to be made. As you said, the kicking game has to be a varied one, but you do want to put the pressure on the Argentinians, force them to try and attack you, try and create. If they can take a lead early and try and exert scoreboard pressure on them this time rather than be the ones chasing, that'll be a focus. But the defence is kind of there to serve to get the ball back and transition. That's what the All Blacks are about at their core. And to be fair, all of our foibles about their attack in terms of their multi-phase, or all of our critiques even, they don't ring true on transition. They still
got beautiful attacking instincts. Like we're going to talk about Ireland in due course, and our frustrations with their inability to execute overlaps. Like, as much as the All Blacks are struggling at the moment, that frustration isn't there. No, if the overlap comes, they'll take it.
Yeah, for sure. But they can't rely on just the Pumas rolling over. They will need to control the game a bit more than they did. They need to be a bit more savvy, a bit more clinical as well, more disciplined on balance, and you're just looking for a more cohesive All Black performance. That's what all the All Black fans want. It's what the All Blacks themselves want, and it's what they'll need to both win this game and finish the season on a bit more of a positive note. But also, they're still in prime position to take some silverware from it, despite the back-to-back losses.
Yeah, 100%. In terms of predictions, do you have them for us?
Yeah, I do. And despite I'm repping my Argentinian blue here, but I fear for them this week. I kind of do. I think the All Black backlash will be real. I hope that it's still that the Puma side, as we suspect, are of such a quality that even with that backlash, it's not a blowout. It's a competitive, nitty-gritty, tight game. But I do think the All Blacks will probably edge it a little. And I think, as you said, the Pumas' inability to kind of really penetrate with their attack probably will cost them, because I think the All Blacks might grab 1 or 2 scores to put them in a bit of arm's reach, and then maybe a few mistakes from the Pumas if they're trying to force it.
Yeah, that was nearly entirely what I was going to say. Funny enough, it's like we often try and disagree for colour. I mean, I do tend to go... I tend to like, when I'm predicting a game, to ignore the sort of historical context and just go with what I'm seeing. And what I'm seeing is an All Black team that are not creative and have been struggling to impose themselves at all in games when they haven't owned it physically.
Yeah.
And then you've seen an Argentina team that has been extremely physical and hasn't allowed anybody to impose themselves physically.
Well, have imposed themselves physically, but then not quite creative with it.
Yeah, but if you look at that dynamic, it looks like the All Blacks might struggle, and it could be another sort of tight test like we saw last week. But the All Blacks are still the All Blacks, and as you say, the Pumas struggled on offense to such an extent last week that you'd worry for them this week. And I just think that the All Black players are a little better than they've shown recently. Like Super Rugby Aotearoa was the best domestic competition this year, and it wasn't close in terms of skill level and everything else. And that's still in them. And I like to think that they're going to, on the last day of the season, when they're fighting for their coach's life and their captain's life and responding to the media,
avoiding three L's in a row,
that all of that sort of intangible, passionate element that was on the Pumas side 2 weeks ago might actually have flipped over to the All Black side this time. And so that'll be enough. And as far as a margin, I don't know, it could be brutal. Like if they click, it could be absolutely brutal for the Pumas and they could win the competition. They do need to think in those terms because of a 4-1 win probably might not be enough. So are they going to be the ruthless, brutal 4-try winning All Blacks? Maybe, but I predicted that the last time, so I don't know. I'm sort of between minds, but I think the All Blacks will win.
I think we're edging towards the All Blacks, but kind of hope I'm wrong because I would love to see the Pumas do it.
They're both great teams. It's a great match and it has been a fabulous tournament.
Yes,
and indeed. Certainly the saviour of rugby this autumn in terms of getting crowds into stadiums. It's the second last week now of Southern Hemisphere rugby, but in terms of COVID and everything that happened, we didn't know if we were going to get any rugby at all this year. It has been mighty enjoyable and really has salvaged the season from that point of view.
Yeah, I think so. A great debt is owed to all those teams. Fair play for putting it on, and best of luck for the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much for tuning into the Overlap Rugby podcast. If you're new here, please do like and subscribe and ring the bell as well so you'll be notified when we upload. But mainly drop a comment down below as well. We love hearing your thoughts on the rugby. Cheers.